Welcome back to Movie Recaps. Today I will show you a mystery, horror film titled Shutter. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. It's late at night and most of the guests at the wedding party have already left. A small group of people is still around drinking though, young photographer Tun, his girlfriend Jane, and Tun's best friends from college, including the groom Ton. When they finally leave, Jane gets to drive while Tun chats with her in the passenger seat. It's his flirting that distracts her for a moment, so when she turns around to look at him, she almost doesn't notice the woman suddenly walking in front of the car. Jane turns the car around as fast as possible and gets it off the road until it crashes. Thankfully, neither of them gets hurt, but when Jane looks at the rearview mirror, she sees the woman lying on the road, very likely dead. She wants to go check on her, but there's another car coming, so Tun stops her from getting off and urges her to drive away. After a moment of hesitation, Jane does as he requests and they leave without knowing anything about the victim. The next day, Tun goes to his sister's graduation and takes pictures of the ceremony. When he's about to take a picture of the whole class, he notices a pale face among the students. Shocked, he lowers the camera and checks his surroundings, but it seems he's the only one that has noticed, so he just finishes his job as usual. Later, Tun is working in his darkroom at home when Jane arrives, but she continues to act distant and doesn't have a reason why she didn't go to the graduation ceremony. She can't understand how Tun can live normally because guilt has been heavy in her mind and she hasn't been able to sleep well since the night of the accident. Tun reminds her it was just an accident, and Jane thinks that's easy for him to say because he hadn't been the one behind the wheel. A couple of days later, Tun goes to the photography shop to pick up the prints of the graduation pictures. However, when he begins checking them out, he notices a white shadow appearing on a bunch of them. Tun tells the clerk that his machine must be broken, but the clerk grabs the negatives and shows them the problem is on the originals. Meanwhile, Jane returns to the apartment and hears running water coming from the darkroom. She calls Tun's name and gets no answer, and the door is locked, but she can see a shadow walking around through the door gap. Suddenly, the door and the knob start shaking before it finally opens, so Jane steps inside, worrying when the door closes behind her. After checking there's nothing behind the curtain, she approaches the running tap water, which has filled the sink to the brim. But when she's about to shut it off, a head begins appearing in the water. Shocked and scared, Jane runs towards the door asking for help, but it's locked again. She continues to shake it as the head comes out of the water together with a couple of hands, and when Jane turns around, she suddenly sees the woman from the road screaming and reaching out with her hand. It's then that Jane wakes up. A few hours later, Tun comforts her and reminds her he's there for her before going back to check his camera to see if it's broken. Jane looks through the photos as well and finds something Tun didn't notice before, a pale face floating among the students in the group picture, which makes her think again of the woman on the road. They decide to visit a funeral foundation to pay respects and find a board filled with pictures of accidents, including one that has the same white shadow. Inspired by this, they go to check out the scene of the accident, and the traffic officer tells them a car crashed against a billboard sign, but nobody got hurt, the only consequences were the broken sign. Next, Tun calls a friend of his to ask for help. This person checks every hospital and police precinct, but this particular accident wasn't reported anywhere. Jane still believes something weird and related to this is on those pictures, but Tun insists it's just bad exposure. When he returns home, he double-checks the negatives and produces a close-up of the picture where he finds the ghost face again, which suddenly turns to look at him. He decides to go see the photographer at the shop to get his opinion, but he laughs at the idea of ghosts and shows him another example of a floating that just happened because of double exposure. Meanwhile, at college, Jane is in class listening to a professor talk about how photography doesn't always reproduce reality, framing and perspective can show completely different things. Jane can't take it anymore and leaves class earlier, and on her way home, she stops by the newspaper stand when she finds a magazine that has published an article about spirit photographs. Back at the apartment, Tun is working in the darkroom when he notices Jane walking next to him, not expecting her at this hour yet. When the phone rings, he goes to pick it up and is shocked to hear Jane telling him she'll arrive a bit late today. Shocked and scared of who he actually saw a moment ago, Tun begins to slowly walk back into the darkroom but finds it empty. Sometime later, while in the car, Jane asks Tun what is the problem with his neck, and he explains it's been hurting since the accident. They arrive at the office of the magazine publisher and are disappointed to find they edit the pictures to make it look like there are ghosts on them, but they still decide to have a talk with the editor. He tells them they need to fake the photographs because they don't have enough legit material to publish on a regular basis, but he does have a few real pictures, including one of himself with the ghost of his mother. The couple is still skeptical since they can't tell the real ones from the fake ones, so the editor shows them a few Polaroids, which couldn't have possibly been edited. He thinks these pictures aren't just urban legends, and that the shadows are always related to someone on the picture that maligned them in life. The answer they are looking for is on the pictures themselves. Tun goes back to work, and after his clients are gone, he notices how the lights start to flicker. Soon after, the entire power goes out. Tun moves around in the darkness, trying to locate the light switch, and begins to get scared when the camera's flash starts going off over and over again. A ghost girl appears near him in the darkness, making him trip over his camera tripod, and as she gets closer, he finally reaches the light switch and turns it back on, finding nothing in the room when he can see again. Sometime later, he goes to see a doctor for his neck pain. There's something strange with the scale because it shows double his regular weight, and none of the tests show anything wrong with him. The doctor still gives him some painkillers, and when Tun goes to pick them up at the pharmacy, he thinks he hears the nurse call him a liar, but he can never actually see the lips move, so he runs away without his pills. Later that night, he begins wearing a cervical collar, and he throws all his pictures on the floor after getting nervous because a documentary on TV kept talking about female grasshoppers eating their partners' heads while mating. Tun goes to see Jane at college, finding her alone in the classroom. When he comes closer, he notices blood dripping on her textbook, and suddenly Jane throws up even more blood, turning around to show blood also coming out from her eyes. As she continues to throw up blood and even her own teeth, Tun wakes up in bed. He goes to the kitchen to get some water and hears some noises, so he goes to the living room to check. It turns out it's his friend Tun, who isn't looking very well. He says he's going to die soon and asks Tun for some pictures he hid, also he wonders if he remembers that crazy girl. Suddenly he starts freaking out, shaking Tun as he begs for the pictures, so Tun tells him to calm down while he calls his wife. Tun notices something in the apartment though, so he runs away before Tun's call is even picked up. Sometime later, Tun is tidying up his shelves while Jane looks at the pictures again and notices the white shadows always come from the same window on the college building, so she decides to go investigate. She takes a Polaroid camera with her and takes a picture of the window before entering, but it comes out well. When she enters the right room, she discovers it's a science lab, filled with dead animals in jars. She begins taking pictures around, but none of them come out with a shadow until she takes one near the shelves. This one has the presence of a blurry girl on it. As she starts walking away, she hears a scream behind her and something falls. It's a photograph of a student called Nutter receiving a special award. Remembering the night of the accident, Jane quickly remembers this is the girl she hit on the road. She hurries back to her place to check Tun's yearbook, confirming that Nutter used to be Tun's classmate. Meanwhile, Tun goes to visit Tun. He finds the door open so he lets himself in, only to find a mess in the living room. There also are pictures with shadows on them on the table, and since Tun gets distracted by them, he doesn't notice Tun at the balcony, getting ready to jump. By the time he does notice, it's too late. Tun has fallen on top of a car and died. A few minutes later, the ambulance has come, and also has Jane to comfort him. Tun's wife also arrives and tells Tun that this is all his friend group's fault. It turns out the other two friends have also ended things. Soon after, it starts raining, so Jane and Tun wait for the storm to calm down inside the car. Jane takes the chance to ask him about Nutter, so he finally tells her what he knows. Nutter and he were classmates in college, where Nutter spent most of her time alone because she was shy and everyone thought she was weird. Tun felt bad for her so he decided to befriend her and even date her, although they kept it a secret. Nutter loved him a lot and even gifted him a camera, which made him realize she was way more invested in their relationship than he was. Tun started to act more coldly towards her and wouldn't defend her against his friend's bullying. Eventually, he broke up with her and Nutter didn't take it well, threatening to hurt herself if he didn't take her back. Jane still doesn't understand how this affects Tun's friends, so he explains that he asked Tun to take care of Nutter, who disappeared shortly afterward. But he has no idea what they did, and now he's sure he'll die next. Later in the apartment, after taking his painkillers, Tun is resting with his head on Jane's lap while on the couch, telling her how he wishes he could go back in time and fix things, and neither of them notices the very low noise coming from the camera across the room. The couple decides to go on a trip, and they stop by a gas station to use the bathroom. While Tun is doing his thing, he hears someone entering the stall next to his, so when he realizes he is out of toilet paper, he asks the person to share his. The hand that appears under the stall wall is a woman's, so Tun freaks and rushes to check on her, but she's just a normal human being. Back on the road, they're waiting at the street lights when Tun notices something in the rearview mirror. It's Nutter's bloody body suddenly standing up and coming closer. Tun begins driving at a very high speed to lose her, but she soon appears on Jane's window, and then right in front of him. Tun loses control of the car and ends up taking it off the road, but by the time it stops, she's already gone. The next day, they stop to ask for directions, and Tun gets nervous when a child monk gives him a very weird look. Eventually, they finally make it to their destination, Nutter's home. Her mother lets them in when she hears they're her daughter's friends and shocks them when she says Nutter's taking a nap. After she leaves the room to get some food, the couple goes upstairs to investigate, and after seeing a variety of medicine bottles, they enter Nutter's room. What awaits for them there is indeed Nutter, but in the form of her decaying body. The mother finds them and takes them back downstairs, where she says she won't cremate her when Jane asks her to. To convince her, Tun shows her the photos as he explains Nutter's spirit is restless. The mother cries and, after wondering why her ghost won't visit her too and what happened to her to make her leave the city, she accepts to organize a funeral. Later, during the ceremony, one of the neighbors tells the couple that when Nutter came back, She wouldn't talk to anyone and wouldn't say why she dropped college. Then she overdosed on pills, but her mother found her in time and took her to the hospital. When she woke up there, she climbed to the roof and jumped off the edge. While they pray, Tun notices some candles going out and feels Nutter's presence behind him touching his shoulder, so he startles everyone in the room when he suddenly stands up in fear and finds nothing. A few hours later at the hotel, neither of them can sleep, so Jane asks Tun if he ever truly loved Nutter. He admits he tried and thought one day he could, but he didn't. He also was quite mean to her when he broke up with her. Wanting this to be over with, he considers letting her kill him, but Jane won't allow it. They've come this far, now they just need to wait for the cremation. The couple falls asleep cuddling, but Tun wakes up again a few moments later when a storm starts howling outside. He tries to go back to sleep, but suddenly he feels his blanket being pulled off, and he's shocked to find Nutter crouching at the foot of the bed. She starts climbing on the mattress, so Tun turns to wake Jane up, but when he looks ahead again, Nutter is gone. He checks under the bed and there's nothing there, then he sits up again, and that's when Nutter appears right next to him. Tun runs out of the room and finds the elevator isn't working. Since Nutter is at the end of the hallway coming after him while walking on the ceiling, he opens the emergency exit and runs downstairs, only to find himself on the same floor. He tries a couple of times again, always returning to the same spot, until he finally comes across Jane. Tun tells her they need to go and grabs her hands to pull, but finds her wrists hurt and bleeding. It's actually Nutter using Jane's face, and she grabs Tun's face as she demands to know why she left her and wouldn't love her back. Tun pushes her off and goes back to the hallway to then climb out of the window and take the emergency stairs. Nutter follows him and climbs after him, even appearing right in front of his face, which makes him slip and fall to the ground. Sometime later, Tun wakes up in the hospital with a broken arm. Jane is sitting next to the bed and after helping him calm down, she tells him they're cremating Nutter's body today, so this will be over soon. Before going home, the couple watches Nutter's mother take the coffin to be cremated so they can be sure it's been done. Afterward, the couple goes on a vacation to recover from their stress. When they return, Jane goes to the photograph shop to pick up their holiday pictures, and at first, everything looks just fine. Their beach photos are perfect. But at the end of the camera roll, there are some pictures they didn't know about. Someone took photos of them while they were resting on the couch after Tun's death, and Nutter's ghost can be seen on them. Jane takes the pictures home and starts watching them closely until she realizes Nutter is moving in a particular direction. She's in fact crawling towards the shelves Tun had supposedly been tidying up. She goes looking for clues there and finds a hidden set of negatives that she takes to the darkroom to develop. What she finds in the resulting pictures is quite disturbing. It turns out the way Tun got rid of Nutter was taking advantage of her while his two friends held her down. At that moment, Tun enters the room and a crying Jane wastes no time in insulting him and slapping him. Tun grabs her and asks her to let him explain. He hadn't known what Tun's plan was, he had walked on them by accident, and Tun asked him to take a picture to use as blackmail in case she tried something in the future. He says he was young and stupid and did it for his buddy, but he's felt guilty since. This isn't enough for Jane, who leaves the apartment. Tun proceeds to start burning all the pictures and finds one of the Polaroids Jane had taken at the lab. Getting suspicious, he goes back to the living room and, as he calls out for Nutter to come out, he begins taking pictures around the apartment to find her. Nothing shows up on the photos, so a frustrated Tun throws the camera on the floor, which takes one more picture when it lands. Tun looks at it and finally learns the reason why his neck has been hurting so much. Nutter's ghost has been sitting on his shoulders. She is there now too, and grabs his head to make him stumble until he falls out of the window. A few days later, Jane visits Tun at the hospital, finding him slumping over with a lost look on his face. As she enters the room and the door closes behind her, the reflection on the glass shows Nutter is still sitting on his shoulders. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.